Welcome back to the swamp, my friends. Today we are going to be covering some strange and creepy night shift stories. If you have a story that you would like to share in a future video, whether it be a night shift story or something different, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I'd love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that help keep this channel going. These are going to be a lot of fun, so be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't. And be sure to sit back, relax, and enjoy these creepy night shift stories. I can't say what I do specifically, but no, it is nights and involves security of some kind. I am not working in the United States. I want to make that very clear. There is a local legend in the area I work that speaks of witches. Now, I know hearing that sentence, you are prone to laugh, and I was too upon hearing the legends. There are plenty of stories around children going missing, and many locals believe this is due to witches. I wasn't convinced when I first heard the stories, and while I'm not 100% convinced now, I am convinced something weird is going on. I work nights, as I stated before, and I patrol a large area. It's usually quiet at night in the area I work in. Sometimes we run into obstacles and we take care of that, but it is increasingly rare. That said, a lot of people have been missing as of late. 42 children have gone missing over the past 5 years. I'm not talking, oh, they wandered into the forest and vanished. I'm talking really strange stuff, like they are in bed and then they are not. In some of the places, there are metal bars over the windows to prevent burglary. In one such place, there is only one way in or out, and it requires you to go through the heavily guarded front door. A child went missing, even in a place like that, while people watched the front door the entire time. Suspecting tunnels of some sort, which wouldn't be out of the ordinary in the area, we did search for them, but found nothing of that sort. It is truly as though the kid just vanished into the air. Mind you, that's impossible, and I don't believe that's what happened even for a minute. I suspect someone on the job was paid to make the kid disappear. I won't go too deeply into it. While strange, there are possible or normal explanations for such things. Still, if they did do such things, and they cover their tracks very well. Why am I explaining all this? Well, to give you an idea of the strange stuff going on in the area, to provide as much context as I can for what I'm about to share. I work from the moment the sun sets to the moment it rises. I cover a large area and watch things. That's as in detail as you will hear about things in this story in relation to my job. Anyway, I was working my job one night when I heard a very distinct, childlike scream. I found this strange and immediately called for backup before knocking on the home I believed the screams to be coming from. Upon getting no answer, I knocked one more time, stating who I was, and if I got no response, I'd be knocking in the door. It was then a woman came to the door. She looked tired and pretty scared. I asked her if everything was all right, to which she said, yes. I asked if she minded if I came in as I heard a child screaming. She explained her daughter had a nightmare. I told her it was all right, but kept a close watch on the house afterward. It was then I noticed something strange. I could see a black vapor-like mist flowing from a window in the room. I shined a light on it. I heard an ear-piercing screech, and then witnessed the mist dart off and vanish into the distance. I'm not sure how to explain that, but I quickly knocked on the door. I was once again met with the confused gaze of the same woman. I informed her there was a black-like mist coming from the back window, and while I wasn't sure what it was, I thought it was enough of a security threat to check the home. I then asked if the woman's daughter was okay. The woman looked confused and said yes, she'd been sleeping all night. I questioned the woman's logic and explained we had just visited her home and said she had been having nightmares and screaming. The woman looked even more perplexed, at which point I asked if I could come in. The woman let me in and went back to the back room to show me that her daughter was sleeping, but when we got there, the daughter was missing and the mother began panicking. Now, her panic was understandable, but I wanted answers as to why she said her daughter had been having nightmares but then suddenly changed her story to her daughter having been sleeping all night. She assured me she had never had this conversation and that she had been sleeping up until the time I came knocking on her door to inform her of the strange happenings around her back window. Looking in the woman's eyes, I could see she was telling the truth and promptly formed a search party. We searched everywhere, including neighboring towns, but sadly, we never found her daughter. Not even a sign of her. I'm not sure how to explain that, but it does bring up a lot of questions. While I obviously don't believe it was witches, I am perplexed by what the thing in that window could have been. Even more bothersome, if this woman really didn't answer the door the first time, who answered the door? And why did they look and sound just like her? How did this thing move so fast? Were the thing at the window and the thing that appeared at the door the same thing? How would that be possible? Most importantly, what the heck is that thing? I don't have answers, and I probably never will. But whatever it is, it stole a child, and even someone as a matter of fact as myself shudders at the thought of what might have happened to that kid afterwards. I'll always feel guilt over never finding the kid. I'll always wonder, what in God's name was that thing? My name is Danny, and I'm a night watchman for a local museum in my area. Yes, get all your night at the museum jokes out of the way now. No night watchman at a museum is as fun as that movie. And to be honest, most nights it's the most mundane thing you could possibly do. That said, it's also a very easy and well-paying job, and I enjoy it quite a bit. I've been doing this job for a good 22 years, and I'm getting ready to retire in about another 3. Every night of this job has been mundane except for once. It was back in 2009, and it is a night I will never forget. It was a Saturday night, and I was scheduled to work my normal 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. stint. You'll find that night watchman isn't exactly a thrilling job, and so usually, you'll more often than not fall into a very specific routine, route, and pattern. For the most part, it's super easy. There are cameras and a security room in this museum, and more often than not I spend most of the night in that room. That said, we are required to do foot patrols once every hour to make sure nothing is going on in the blind spots of the cameras or in the areas we don't have cameras. The biggest thing I typically need to be wary of is that someone isn't still in the facility. We have a lot of stuff in the museum and some of it is very valuable. Now sometimes I find a kid who snuck in somehow, or more often than not wasn't spotted by the day crew when closing up. It's happened on more than a few occasions. It's never been anything more than a stern talking to needed before I either called their parents or, if they're a bit older, escorted them out. I don't often need to actually involve the police, as I'd never actually have anyone really fight me. Anyway, on this particular night, I was chilling in the security room, listening to my iPod while watching the feed. Everything was quiet, and I really wasn't having any sort of issues. It was your typical night. At least it started that way. At around 11, I got up to do my next foot patrol. It was then I realized something was off. I noticed some small things had been moved. A display had been tilted in a different direction. A hat was swapped out with a model gun, and there was this weird feeling that I was being watched. Weirded out, but not really feeling threatened, I looked around and called out. I should note, I wasn't playing my iPod on my foot patrol for obvious reasons. So I searched the place high and low, but strangely, never found anyone. This concerned me as it was clear some things had been moved around. I searched for a bit longer before heading back to the security room and watched the area closely. Everything was quiet and calm at first. Then, out of nowhere, I see a figure on the side of the displays move to the side, seemingly on its own. I jump up and head to the area only to find no one around and the figure pointed in my direction. Now this was certainly odd, and at the time I wasn't really sure what to think. I was never really a skeptic or a believer in the paranormal, and this kind of just confused me more than anything. At the time, I wasn't even thinking about ghosts. I was still convinced someone was somehow messing with me, and so I spent the next 2 hours covering every inch of the museum and double-checking every door possible. Ultimately, I never found anything. There was no one around, no strange noises, nothing. Going back to the security room, I watched things again. I was more curious and somewhat excited than I actually was scared because honestly, this was a far livelier night than I had ever had previously on the job. I mean, at least I wasn't bored sitting in a chair listening to music. I soon watched as the same display has moved back into place. It appeared to be all on its own, and seeing as I had no other way to explain it, I just resumed my normal patrol that night and didn't do any extended foot patrols or anything. Now, in the morning, when I was about to clock out, I explained what had happened to the owner of the building. They didn't really care or seem to pay any interest into it. They simply asked if everything was still fine, and I told them yes, nothing was vandalized or anything like that. I then asked about it, and they simply said odd things happen from time to time around the museum at night, but never anything violent or bad. They thought it had maybe some added charm to the place, and the only thing they were surprised at was that I hadn't noticed anything like this sooner. After that, I went home for the weekend. I will always remember that night because it was odd, and I still have odd happenings happen around my workplace from time to time, but it's never been anything malicious, and I won't pretend it is or isn't a ghost. It's simply strange, but past that, I'm not really speculating. I just thought you might be interested in the story and you could speculate over what it was for yourself. Thank you. My name is Matt, and I do night shift security around an old shipping yard. Most nights are relatively tame, but we do get some pretty large ships that come through the yard for repairs and such, and with that, there's a lot of history to many of these boats. The experiences I'm going to share with you happened in May of 2013. I wasn't new to this line of work, but I was new to this yard. I had recently moved and was contracted to watch over the area. I would say at this point I'd been doing this for only a month or so, in this shipping yard that is. Anyway, I made my initial rounds around the yard one night, and hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. Sure, you always get weird sounds or may think you see something out of the corner of your eye, but upon investigation you usually realize that it's just your imagination, or something easily explainable, like the boat making a sound in the water itself or any number of other normal things that aren't really threatening. So it was around 3 in the morning when I was checking the dock, and the yard itself after having made my rounds through the ships. At this point, I'm normally getting ready to wrap things up. Many of the workers get in relatively early for their jobs, and I'm usually out by between 4 or 5 in the morning. I'm usually chilling and taking a break when I hear a sudden and loud grinding sound coming from one of the ships. It's loud enough that it startles me and also hurts my ears. Think like nails on a chalkboard, as that's how painful the sound was. I cut my break short and head to where I heard the sound. Upon getting on the ship, I then hear another sound behind me. The sound was almost like someone tapping on a metal pipe on the side of a ship. I turn and scan the area and think it's probably some kid who snuck in to mess with me, or maybe even one of the dock workers. The tapping stops and I hear it again, further away and back in the direction of the initial grinding sound. I shout out, "Very funny, you can come out now." The tapping stops and I hear it again, further away again. I then declare who I am and what I do in case it isn't someone I know. At this point, I'm obviously thinking it's a couple of kids or some of the other workers messing with me. I was newer and sometimes people would do this sort of thing in jest. I rush up and around the corner and see nothing. I quickly run through the ship, looking high and low, intent on finding whoever is messing with me. The ships I have to look through are massive, and you could easily get lost if you weren't careful. There are plenty of places to hide, so someone vanishing wouldn't be unusual if they knew the layout and where to go and how to hide. I was deep within the ship when I hear a pained sob. What I mean by this is someone is crying, but it isn't like a sad cry, but the cry of someone who's in pain. I can now hear it on the other side of the door. Opening the door, I look inside to find what I believe is a man cutting on his face with a knife and crying. Shocked, I ask the man to leave. The man just keeps crying and cutting himself. I tell the man I need him off the boat and that I can get him some help when I hear that grinding sound again from down the hall behind me. I look back out into the hall and it stops. I turn back toward the man and he's gone. The room in question is very small and he couldn't have gotten out of the area without me noticing. I'm pretty surprised and becoming quite unnerved now. People don't generally just disappear, and this guy had a knife. I start looking all over the ship and it quickly becomes apparent that no one is around. I remember checking my watch at this point. The reason being is when I checked I noticed that it was about 4 a.m, and at this point, it must be later. I'm thinking, great, I've got some guy with a knife who could be a danger to himself or others just wandering the ship, and I've basically got an hour to find him. I continue my search and turn up nothing. I check a couple of more times as quickly as I can before I hear one of the dock managers outside. I explained to him what I saw and how I couldn't find the man I'd seen any longer. I told him about the grinding noises and the strange events of the night. It is at this point the guy smiles and tells me, "Oh, you just met Crying Eddie. Yeah, we're all familiar with him, alright." The manager then goes on to explain how people will occasionally see him, and the first time is usually the scariest, but also that he isn't a real harm to anyone, even himself. I, naturally confused, asked him what that is. Nonchalantly, the man looks at me and laughs, saying with all due respect, Crying Eddie killed himself years ago. I remember being in shock at how casually the manager spoke of this. It was as if this was nothing to him. Mind you, I've been around shipping yards before, and there's a lot of superstition around ships in the sea. Normally, though, you just hear stories about, missing people and things like that, most of which believe are just legends or are made up. I had never experienced anything like this prior to this night. I'm positive the guy wasn't messing with me either, as he went on to explain the man's story and the description of him to a T. I'll share with you what I was told. Apparently, Crying Eddie was a man that had been an exemplary employee at the shipping yard for about 19 years. He was due in for his retirement a few months before he committed suicide. The man had a wife and a child who, unfortunately, he lost in a car accident about a year prior to his suicide. Eddie would often take his breaks in isolated areas of the ship so he would cry. I think that seemed rational, as if I'd lost my family I'd be pretty broken up too. All that said, one day he didn't return from break. One of the workers found him, bleeding from several deep cuts to his body and crying about his wife and kid. Eddie would ramble in circles about how he missed them and how he wanted to see them and how he would see them again soon. His co-worker who found him tried to get the knife from Eddie, but Eddie threatened to use it on the man. Needing help, he called out to his other workers to help him. It was around the time help showed up that Eddie turned the knife on himself and stabbed himself multiple times in the throat, while laughing and crying and repeating the phrase, "I'll see you soon," until he could no longer speak. I remember feeling sad for the guy when I heard this story. I couldn't imagine losing my family all at once. I imagine it would leave anyone feeling isolated and alone. I haven't seen Eddie much since the first night I saw his ghost, but I do hear unexplained crying on that ship from time to time. I figure it's best to let him be. The saddest part is, if his ghost is on the ship, I feel as though that would mean he never got to be with his family again. My name is Sean. I'm 45 and I run my own private security company. The job is in the name. People contract us to do security over their places for a set fee. Some jobs are large and involve more militaristic duty, and some are smaller and only require we watch over someone's land. For privacy reasons, I won't say much more than that. On the night in question, we were watching over a farmer's land that we were contracted to spend the week watching. We get jobs like this from time to time. Usually, it is because they wish to protect their crops, or at times their land may be used as an out-of-the-way spot for drug dealers or other criminals to meet. Obviously, they don't want that sort of thing happening, so they have us watch the land. I should mention, this is out in the Midwest. A lot of farmland and a lot of woods as well. After the sun set, I got to work. I run a company with several workers, but I had others on other jobs as this farm seemed small enough to be handled by one person. I'm not the type to spook easily, and I've been through the Marines, so needless to say, I can handle myself. As I said, things were relatively normal at first. The first night came and went. The night the biggest scare happened was a deer popping out of the woods on the perimeter of the farm by itself. I know, terrifying, right? By the second night, I'd warmed up to the idea that this job might be the nice break I needed from a few prior, which were quite intense, and I can't nor will I discuss here. Things were quiet, and I like that. The quieter things are, the easier the money is. You will never hear me gripe about a quiet contract. That's what we look for, and is also beneficial to those who hire us to get the peace of mind that things are quieter around their area. The third night comes and goes and still, nothing. I'm already starting to think about the next job by the fourth night, as it would be taking me out of the country. The farmer who contracted us for a Monday through Friday gig, so technically not a full week, but a work week. It was about 5 in the morning when I heard a strange noise coming from the tree line in the distance. I didn't think much of it, but I had a job to do, and I take my work very seriously, so I investigated. Now, I won't lie. When small noises like this happen, I can usually just write it off, but the job had been boring up until this point, and I figured I needed to be thorough, just in case. Much to my delight, I found the source of the noise was just a rabbit hopping along its way. Nice, I thought to myself. This is the type of gig I wish I had more often. I sipped some coffee I had made a little bit earlier in the night and continued to patrol the farm. Before I knew it, it was daytime, and I spoke with the farm owner, who thanked me and said he felt at ease knowing nothing had happened since I had been there. I told him I'd be by tonight for the final night of my patrol, and I thanked him for such a calm job. The farmer seemed happy, but he still seemed as though something had been bothering him. I asked if he was okay, at which point he shook his head yes, but asked if I could take a look at something with him. I told him sure, and I went with him to a room in his house where he had security feed from some of the cameras around his property. It was then he showed me something. On camera, there was a massive looking shadow that walked around the woods on his property line. It seemed to move slowly and methodically, from camera to camera. Now, we couldn't get a good look at the figure, as even with the night vision it kept a distance far enough away that you couldn't quite make out what it was. Now, my initial thoughts were it might be an animal of some kind, but the problem with that is that it stood on 2 feet, and the way it moved suggested it was, aware that cameras were there. It would constantly patrol the tree line. It at times stopped and lurked as though it was watching something and waiting. I couldn't make much sense of it at the time, and so I told the farm owner that I'd make it a point to check around those areas he had the cameras set up, and check out some of the woods themselves tonight. I figured it would put his mind at ease, and also I'd be able to figure out exactly what was going on in the meantime. On the final night, I took a Desert Eagle and a rifle and headed toward the tree line. I slowly watched and waited through the night. By about midnight, I had seen nothing. I was very cautious in my movements and kept an eye all around me. I didn't see anything, but I felt like something was around. You'll know the feeling I speak of if you've ever been home alone at night and you suddenly feel like you're being watched or someone is near you. I looked high and low in the area, and I hadn't found anything. Keep in mind, I used to be a Marine. I'm trained to spot even the most subtle of movements. By 1 in the morning, I was about ready to turn back and head to the farm. It was about that point I had heard the deepest grumble and growl I have ever heard. I turned around. The second I did, I was flat on my back, the wind knocked out of me, struggling to breathe. Something had jumped me and immediately vanished all in a span of a second. I got up, still struggling to catch my breath when I heard this growling again. I had just caught my breath when I saw these massive eyes staring at me from deeper in the woods. This behemoth of a beast lurched, and I let loose with my Desert Eagle. I let out 3 rounds, 2 to the chest and 1 to the head, of whatever this thing was before turning and hauling butt out of the woods. I have never run so quickly in my entire lifetime. Standing at the tree line, backing away now, slowly as I exited the woods, I held my gun up when I saw the glow of this thing's eyes and the glint of its teeth in the moonlight. It let out the deep growl and snarled at me before slowly pulling back into the woods again. It was a couple of minutes later, when it didn't seem to give any real chase, that I realized I was shaking uncontrollably and I holstered my weapon. I watched that area like a hawk for the rest of the night. Things remained quiet and nothing else happened. The next morning, I talked to the farmer and explained to him what I had encountered. The man checked the cameras, and what he saw chilled me to the bone. This thing had been following me the entire time I was in the woods. I will tell you now, prior to it letting me know it was there, and it getting aggressive, I didn't hear a single sound in those woods. The night vision didn't really give a proper picture of the thing. I can tell you this though, that this thing was massive. I've never seen a creature so big in my life. It also was disturbingly fast and quiet. I asked the farmer what he thought this could be, but he was as lost as I was. I explained to him the thing never seemed to leave the woods, but it was quickly decided that it wasn't safe anywhere in that area. He explained, however, that a few of his sheep had gone missing in the night, so he suspected it must leave the woods just long enough to feed. I've been in contact with the farmer since, and he's described that from time to time some of his animals would go missing, but he's never had a direct encounter with whatever this beast is. He paid me in full, and I've never gone back to that area since. It's not really unusual as we go all over, but I can say with certainty that I would like to never go back there again, even if he paid me 10 times the amount he paid me for that job. As I said before, I was a Marine, and after I got into private security, I'm not easily shaken, and I'm not easily unnerved. But that night, that job, I found fear. I hope to never come across anything like that ever again. I won't say my name. I'll just say I'm 32 and a male. I'm a facilities guy for Parks and Rec, and I work nights. Now, facilities guy is just another way of saying I'm the maintenance man. I do a lot of cleaning and any pickup needed. When you work night shift, you have to go around and quickly clean everything and host any nighttime events, as well as cover all facilities in the area before your shift ends around midnight in my case. One night I had what you would call a typical work night. Typical work nights, as I call them, are the ones where you don't have any events going on, so you basically just go from facility to facility, making sure upkeep is done and doing things like taking out the trash, replacing said trash bags, and making sure there is no vandalism, etc. Being a lot of our facilities are in and around parks, we get a lot of transients and homeless. The homeless are fine and normally very understanding individuals. If I need them to move on or even just further away from my facility, they are normally very understanding and will comply at the very least until I move to the next facility. I'm a nice guy, and I don't like to give people too hard of a time, as I've been homeless and I know what it's like. That said, the transients are almost always a horrible interaction. Transients generally choose to live homeless on purpose and are often addicted to drugs or will commit crimes because they can, basically. They are uncooperative 99.9% of the time, and since most of the time they are just released immediately, if they are arrested at all, they have no qualms about causing a scene or stabbing you if it's in their interest or they simply wish to. So, needless to say, I have to be careful. Transients aren't usually a big concern until I get to the last facility of the night. That facility is in our highest crime neighborhood in the city I work. Now for the record, I think it's great to have a facility like this in a neighborhood like this because it helps keep kids from getting into gangs and such like that, which are very prevalent in this neighborhood. That said, working the nights in an area like this can go, if lucky, perfectly well, and quietly, or be a complete horror show. Now, generally, the gangs in the area won't mess with you if you aren't in their business, just mind your own business, keep walking, keep your head down, and you'll be fine. A lot of people I've come across while working my shift will even be understanding of the fact that I'm just doing my job as well. I'm not defending gangs by any means, but I am also not saying that they're bad, I am saying most of the ones in my neighborhood go by, and as long as you stay out of their business, they'll stay out of yours. Anyway, on this night, I was wrapping up my cleanup and was pretty stoked as I had the next 2 nights off. It was around this time I was preparing to do my last check of the facility and clock out and go home. As I was making my rounds, I hear a sudden noise from upstairs. When I say upstairs, I'm referring to an attic area where a lot of ventilation systems are. In order to access it, you need to pull down an attic, which creates steps, and then you'll need to climb a ridiculously tall ladder and hang off of one with one hand to push a fairly heavy door open so you can climb up to the attic area of the facility. It's not an easy place to access, but you can do so if you know what you're doing and no one is around to see you do it. I don't hear anything for a minute or so, when I'm comfortable again, I begin turning off the lights. It is around this time I hear another loud bang from above me. Curious, I open the front door and then shut it again, but I don't exit. I've shut the lights off and I'm waiting around now. It is only now I start hearing stomping. I'm a little on edge as it becomes more and more apparent that someone or something is clearly camping out in the attic area. I thought about calling the cops at first, but we've had an issue with raccoons and such finding their way into the building before, and the last time we called the cops to check on something like this, it turned out it was just bats. After just a couple of more minutes of listening, I decided to take a flashlight and check the area myself. Now the attic stairs are going to make a loud enough noise on their own, but if somebody knows that I'm coming, they can't really go anywhere. As such, I also bring my knife with me just in case. I climb up and get to the ladder and climb into the attic area itself. I shut the door behind me to make sure I don't fall back through this large drop. The moment the door shuts, I notice all I can hear is my breathing and some of the ventilation and such. I'm slowly scanning the area with my flashlight and keeping my knife close by my other hand. As I look around, I notice a raccoon and some babies. At this point, I breathe a huge sigh of relief and prepare to head out. I figure I'll leave a note about the raccoons and the babies and they'll be able to let animal control handle it in the morning. I'm just about to head back toward the door when I hear a shifting sound. I turned around, and suddenly, this older bearded guy lurches at me and knocks me on my butt. I lose my flashlight and my knife and decide to feel around. I tried to find where my knife went. It is around that time I feel something hard hit the back of my head. I feel dizzy, and when I feel something hit me in my right side, between my ribs. Shortly after this I feel it exit and enter me several more times before I'm turned and beaten in the face. I'm dizzy and thinking to myself, I'm clocked out and no one is going to know I'm up here, and I'm going to die. I try to fight back with what strength I had, with any adrenaline that I could afford, as the man tries to stab me with an already bloody knife in the chest. I manage to stop him, and struggling and quite dizzy. After some rolling around, I am able to knock his head into a board and scramble to get up again. I grab my flashlight and see my own knife, which I scramble toward and feel a sharp object stabbing me in the back of my right leg. I'm hurting, but I am also PO'd at this point. So I get to my knife. I turn around just in time to stab this guy. I wind up pushing my knife into the side of his head, but out of shock, I let go. The man falls over and seems out of it, complaining about his head. I get my phone out and call the police. The last thing I remember was saying something to 911, and the next thing I know, I'm awake in a hospital and there's the sweetest nurse I've ever had, looking at me and asking me how I'm feeling. I told her I'm not sure. Then I was flooded with memories of what I had just experienced, and I started freaking out. She calmed me down and reassured me that I'm going to be okay and that I'm safe now. The police were there and an officer asked me everything about what happened. I explained what had happened, and he took the story down and reassured me that the man in question would be spending a time in jail. A long time, that is. I remember being in shock at the fact that the man was alive. I asked how the man was doing, mostly out of reaction to my shock. The cop said he'd been, alive, but that's all he could say about it. I was out of work for quite a while after that. It was all paid leave until I could recover. I'm still a facilities guy today, but I switched to a day shift and am much more comfortable with my job again. The nurse I'd met is my wife now as well. We've been together for about 5 years now, and I can't help but laugh at the morbid irony of it all. I mean, what I experienced was easily the worst experience in my life. That said, had I not experienced it, I never would have met my wife. It's funny how life works. That said, I never want to experience anything like that ever again. The homeless guy who attacked me is in prison for 40 years, and at his age, that likely means life. I'm grateful to be alive today, and I'll never take another day of my life for granted. Thanks for listening to these creepy and unexplainable night shift stories. If you enjoyed these stories, please hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, be sure to submit that at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that help keep this series going. If you're new to the swamp, why not join us? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss a new video, as I upload them almost every single day on all things natural and supernatural. Thank you guys, as always, for listening to these videos and supporting the swamp. It's been a great 2019, and it's not quite over yet. I've got quite a few more surprises for you coming in December. So definitely be sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss any uploads coming up. If you're not aware, you can download your favorite scary stories from the swamp from iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, Podbean, and pretty much every other major podcast retailer. Thank you guys once again for always supporting the channel. If you made it all the way to the end, today's code word is Black Headphones. Comment that down below to let me know you made it all the way to the end, and to confuse anybody who didn't. It's a lot of fun seeing how many of you guys actually do listen to the end. If you guys don't know, before I end this, I want to let you guys know that I do have brand new merch. You can find a brand new Christmas exclusive hoodie and or sweater. You can also use code COLDSHREK, all one word, COLDSHREK, to save $5 on your order. The links to do that will be in the description down below. Thank you guys. I'll see you guys soon.